Today, we bring you a story so astonishing that it will leave you speechless. This is the tale of a bride who gave birth to not one but two twin babies on her very first wedding night. The wedding guests were left in shock, murmuring in disbelief. Even the groom was stunned to see that his wife had made him a father of twins on the very night of their marriage. He went into hiding, ashamed to face anyone. But what was even more surprising was the reaction of the groom's mother. While everyone expected her to scold the bride, she instead celebrated, kissing the babies joyfully as if she had just won a great reward. But when you discover who the father of those babies was, your hair will stand on end. "My name is Ayan," began the groom. "That day was my wedding day. But what happened in the name of marriage is something I will never forget for the rest of my life. I could have never imagined that my wife and my own mother would do something that would humiliate me in front of my entire family." The day of my wedding was supposed to be a celebration. The house echoed with music in the rhythm of dole drums. I had gone to the salon to get ready, and when I returned, my mother met me at the door to ward off the evil eye. "MashaAllah, my son looks so handsome. May Allah protect you from all harm," she said lovingly, as she performed the ritual of offering money over my head and handing it to the maid. Soon, the call to leave for the bride's house arose, and I was surrounded by cousins and friends as I prepared to step outside. But just as I was about to leave, my mother's voice stopped me. "No one is going anywhere," she announced, standing firm. "Everyone, come inside and sit down." Everyone turned to her in confusion. "What's going on, Mom? Is everything okay? Why can't we leave? If we don't take the wedding procession, how will the wedding happen?" I was losing patience. Over the past few days, everything had been unusually chaotic. Her unexplained decisions had tested my limits. And now this. My mother replied, "The procession is already gone. They're bringing the bride back. Sit down. They'll be here soon." Her words left everyone even more bewildered. I couldn't understand what she was saying. How could the procession leave without the groom? "Mom, how can you send the wedding procession without me?" I demanded, trying to make sense of her logic. "Well, you took so long at the salon," she said nonchalantly. "I told them to leave at 4 o'clock. Since you weren't ready, I sent them ahead and told them to bring the bride here directly. The nikah can be performed here. It's already 7 o'clock, and they should be arriving soon." She pinned the blame entirely on me, and I stood there trying to grasp her reasoning. For the past few days, her behavior had been odd. First, she insisted on holding separate Mendi functions for the bride and groom, and now this, sending the procession without me. Defeated, I removed my wedding turban and slumped into a chair. My mother, noticing my disappointment, sat beside me. "Don't lose heart, my son," she said softly. "Once the bride arrives, you can perform all the rituals you want. Besides, tomorrow we'll host a grand walima. You can celebrate to your heart's content then." I wanted to tell her that she had crushed all my dreams and now was asking me to fulfill them later. But I couldn't bring myself to say it. My mother had sacrificed so much for me. She had raised me alone after my father passed away when I was just 7 years old. She had been widowed at the young age of 28, but never remarried, dedicating her life to raising us as both mother and father. Whatever I was today, I owed it entirely to her. My mother was one of the best mothers in the world. She had sacrificed her days and nights to ensure our happiness, and I could never even think of speaking harshly to her, let alone disrespect her. "The bride is here! The bride is here!" Excited voices echoed throughout the house. My mother turned to me and said, "You stay here. I'll go bring her inside." I nodded with a smile. She hurried outside. A few moments later, my mother returned, looking visibly distressed. Her face was pale, and her hurried movements betrayed her anxiety. "Mom, is everything okay?" I asked, concerned. But she didn't respond and rushed past me into the house. The guests outside had started murmuring among themselves. "What kind of girl has Nasima picked for her son? It's shameful. She's already pregnant before marriage. May Allah forgive us. What has the world come to?" Even her family showed no decency, and look at the girl flaunting her condition on her wedding day. "Any other woman would have died of shame by now," the women whispered to one another. Their words didn't make sense to me, and my confusion grew. I quickly made my way to my mother's room, where I found her rummaging through the cupboard. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, but she remained silent, pulling out a bag and throwing a large scarf over herself. She avoided my gaze and moved to leave the room. "Mom, what is all this? Tell me what's happening," I shouted, my patience wearing thin. "I'll explain when I get back," she said hurriedly, and walked out without another word. I followed her outside, but by the time I reached, the car had already sped away. I realized she had taken my bride somewhere, but where? I had no idea. I could still hear the women talking, their whispers filled with judgment. Their voices buzzed in my ears like a swarm of bees, and my heart raced with unease. "Calm down, man. Have some patience," my cousin and best friend Jawad said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Jawad, just tell me what's going on. I'll go mad if I don't find out," I pleaded. What he told me next left me utterly stunned. It felt as if the ground had been ripped from under my feet. "Your bride, she's pregnant. She went into labor suddenly, which is why your mom took her to the hospital," Jawad said hesitantly. I stared at him, hoping I had misheard, but his face showed no trace of humor or deception. He wasn't joking, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could this be true? My bride, pregnant? Whose child was she carrying? And my mother, how could she knowingly allow this marriage to happen? Instead of exposing them and breaking off the relationship, she had taken her to the hospital. I stormed into my room, locked the door, and sank into a whirlwind of thoughts. I couldn't accept what was happening. My heart refused to believe that my bride was pregnant. I couldn't understand my mother's actions. Why would she let this happen? Lighting a cigarette, I paced back and forth in my room, my mind filled with questions. The door was knocked on repeatedly, but I didn't open it. I didn't want to face anyone or hear their explanations. Whoever it was eventually gave up and left. I felt as though life had played a cruel joke on me, and the most painful part was that my mother had been a part of it. Never in my wildest dreams had I thought she could do something like this to me. She had always been the one who wanted nothing but happiness for me. Then why, on the most important day of my life, had she ruined everything? For 2.5 hours, I paced in my room, consumed by turmoil. Then there was another knock at the door. "Ayan, please open the door. Are you okay?" Jawad's voice came from the other side. "I'm fine, Jawad," I replied in a dull voice. I felt drained and defeated. "Then why don't you open the door? What's going on?" he pressed. "Jawad, please leave me alone. I don't want to talk to anyone right now. I just need to be by myself," I said firmly. "All right, but your aunt called. She wants to speak to you," Jawad said. "I don't want to talk to anyone," I snapped. "Just go." "Fine, I'm leaving, but don't forget to call your aunt. She's worried about you," Jawad said, his voice filled with concern. I replied bitterly, "Why is she worried now? Where was this worry when they were ruining my life? It's a good thing the situation forced her to go to the hospital in time. Otherwise, Mom would have married me off to a pregnant girl who was about to give birth to some illegitimate children," I muttered, my words harsher than I intended. A while later, when I realized the gravity of my words, I tore at my hair again. I was mentally shattered. I picked up my phone and called my mother. She answered on the first ring, as if she had been waiting for my call. "Ayan, my dear, how are you? Are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "Mom, you tell me. Why did you call?" I asked curtly. "Can you come to the hospital for a little while?" she asked. "I'm not coming, Mom. If there's something you need, just tell me over the phone," I replied. Her voice brightened as she said, "You've been blessed with twin boys. Congratulations." She sounded so happy, as if they were my own children and not illegitimate ones. "Mom, if they were my children, I would have gladly accepted your congratulations. But I can't accept congratulations for someone else's illegitimate offspring," I retorted sharply. "Don't say such things, son. That's wrong. They are your sons," she insisted, trying to reason with me. Her words made no sense. I couldn't understand why she was saying such things. "Mom, they are not my sons. Don't give someone else's mistakes and sins my name," I said firmly. "Thank God the truth was revealed to me in time. Otherwise, you were ready to make them my children." I don't know why you're so blind to the truth. You were about to bring a disgraceful girl into my life. I poured out all my frustrations, listing complaint after complaint. Repent, son. Don't utter words you might regret later. She is not disgraceful. You won't find a girl as pure-hearted and righteous as her, Mom said calmly. Stop overthinking and come to the hospital immediately. Jawad will bring the imam and witnesses, and your nikah will happen here. It's already delayed, and we shouldn't waste more time on this blessed occasion. I was stunned by her calm demeanor. Mom, I'm not crazy. I don't know what's come over you, but I still have my sanity. I will neither come to the hospital nor marry a girl who has already given birth to 2 children before marriage. You can stay with her and have her marry the man who fathered those children because I don't have the tolerance to accept such a disgraceful girl into my life. There are plenty of other girls I can marry, I said coldly. My harshness didn't faze her. Instead, she scolded me. Don't act so high and mighty. Come to the hospital right now, and I'll set your mind straight. I'm not coming, Mom, I replied stubbornly. If you don't come, then consider our relationship over. I will never forgive you, not even for the milk I nursed you with, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Her words left me in shock. I couldn't believe she could go to such lengths for a stranger. Mom, why are you being so stubborn? I said, feeling defeated. I'm not the one being stubborn. You are. If you have even an ounce of respect for me, you'll be at the hospital in half an hour. Otherwise, I'll consider both my sons dead, she said firmly before hanging up. Hello? Mom? I called out, but the line had gone dead. For a long time, I sat there, reflecting on her words. Finally, I decided I had to go to the hospital. Whatever the truth was, it would only be revealed there. However, I made up my mind that no matter what happened, I would not marry that girl or accept her children. I couldn't shake the feeling that the girl was manipulative and had somehow ensnared my mother to the point where she couldn't see beyond her. Reluctantly, I got up and headed to the hospital. When I arrived, my mother's face lit up with joy. She rushed over to me and kissed my forehead. I knew my son would never disobey me. I knew you'd come, she said, smiling warmly. Mom, what is all this about? I asked, but before she could respond, she stuffed a piece of sweet into my mouth. A few moments later, a nurse arrived, carrying 2 tiny, blue-blanketed bundles. My mother carefully took them and brought them toward me. She held them out, but I refused to even glance at them. My mother noticed my reaction and said nothing. Before I could say anything more, Jawad arrived with the imam and witnesses. Mom, I won't marry her, I said firmly once again. Don't make things difficult for me, Ayan, she replied. If you don't want me to sever all ties with you, then you have to marry this girl. Mom, this is so unfair. Why only her? I'm ready to marry any other girl you choose, but not this one, I pleaded. You have to marry her, or else you can marry whoever you like. It won't matter to me, she said with finality. Defeated, I gave in to her demand. She was visibly delighted and took me to a room where a girl, dressed in hospital attire, sat on the bed with a bridal veil over her face. I looked at her with disdain and then sat in a corner. The nikah was performed quickly, and as soon as it was over, I left and went back home. News spread like wildfire. Ayan's bride gave birth to twins on their wedding night. My ears burned from hearing the same thing over and over again. Back in my room, I destroyed everything in my frustration. Then and there, I packed my belongings and returned to duty. As a soldier, I had taken leave to spend some peaceful time at home, but it had turned into a nightmare. I couldn't stay there any longer. Without informing anyone, I left in the dead of night. I left a letter for my mother, switched off my phone, and returned to my post. Anyway, calls don't connect on duty. What I didn't know was that my return would lead to even more shocking revelations. My name is Ayan, and I'm a soldier. At that time, I was on leave visiting home. As I entered the house, I saw my mom smiling as she talked on the phone. Peace be upon you, Mom, I greeted her loudly. She quickly ended the call, rushed toward me, and kissed my forehead. She asked about my health and well-being. I replied that, by the grace of Allah, I was perfectly fine. But, as always, she commented that I looked thin. It's true what they say. Mothers always think their sons look underweight, no matter how strong or bulky they might actually be. Even if their sons look like wrestlers, they'll still say, "Oh, my poor boy, you've gotten so skinny." But who was going to explain to my mother that the thin frame she was referring to was actually the result of my strict gym and diet routine? I had worked hard to build a physique that turned heads wherever I went. Instead of arguing, I laughed and said, "Mom, now that I'm here, feed me all you want and fatten me up. But remember, if I get too fat, no one will give me their daughter." I was joking, but little did I know that Mom had already made all the arrangements. She had been waiting for me to come back so she could move forward with her plans. Mom smiled and said, "If they don't want to give their daughters, they can keep them. I don't need anyone's daughters." Her words caught me off guard. "Mom, don't tell me you're planning to keep me single forever," I teased. She laughed. No, nothing like that. If it were up to me, I'd get you married right now. In fact, I've already found your bride." Her excitement was evident. Her glowing face showed how happy she was. I couldn't help but wonder who the girl was that she had chosen. "Mom, you work so fast. You've already found a girl?" "Let me know who she is," I said, curious. I assumed she must have chosen someone from our family, but to my surprise, she said, "The girl isn't from our family, but she's wonderful, well-mannered, and from a good, respectable family. She's their only daughter." "Mom, do you really like her?" I asked. "Yes, son, I really do. But it's up to you now to decide if you like her too," she replied. "Although I'm confident you won't reject my choice." She was giving me the option to decide, but at the same time, she was subtly taking away my right to refuse. "Mom, I trust your judgment completely. I'm sure you've chosen someone suitable for me. I have no objections to your choice. But before agreeing, I'd like to meet her once," I said. I told my mom that I wanted to meet the girl who was going to become my life partner, just to see what she looked like. For a moment, the brightness on her face dimmed, and I immediately asked, "Mom, is there a problem?" No, son, there's no problem at all," she said quickly. "It's just that you already know this girl. Not only have you seen her, but you know her very well." "That's even better, Mom," I replied. "It'll make things easier for me to meet her." But my mother shook her head. "No, son, meeting her isn't part of the story," she said. "Why not?" I asked. Mom sighed before explaining. "The thing is, the girl agreed to this marriage with great difficulty. She's still studying and didn't want to marry in the middle of her education. I assured her parents that she could continue her studies and we wouldn't stop her. After much convincing, they managed to get her to agree. Now, if you meet her and something happens to upset her, she might back out, and that wouldn't be good at all, would it?" I looked at her thoughtfully, trying to understand her reasoning. "Only 15 to 20 days are left until the wedding," Mom continued. "Just be patient until then. After that, she'll be yours, and you can meet her and talk to her as much as you like." Her explanation made sense, and I decided to remain quiet. There wasn't much else I could do. I could have insisted on meeting her, and Mom might have agreed, but I wanted to enjoy these 15 days of anticipation. Sitting there, I began to picture her in my mind. I created an imaginary image of her and started having silent conversations with her. I was eagerly counting down the days to my wedding. The thought of seeing my bride, dressed beautifully, filled me with excitement. I wished I could fast forward time to wake up the next morning and find it was already my wedding day. Every moment felt like an eternity as I waited for that day to arrive. I was probably the most impatient groom anyone had ever seen. My mother would often call me to sit with her and give me good advice. On one such day, I returned home from outside and she called me over. "Yes, Mom? Is everything okay?" I asked. "Everything is fine," she said, smiling. "I just want to talk to you about a few things." I sat down next to her and she began, "Son, always handle things in life with patience and tolerance. Sometimes things happen that seem very big to us, but if we make our hearts a little bigger, it becomes easier to accept them." I chuckled and said, "Mom, as the wedding day gets closer, you're scaring me more and more. You're giving me advice like I'm going off to war, not getting married. What's the matter?" Hearing this, she playfully tapped me on the head and said, "There's nothing to worry about. I just want my son to become a little more mature now that he's about to get married. Don't worry, Mom. Your son is already very mature, I reassured her with a smile. She kissed my forehead and prayed for my happiness, and I returned to my room laughing. Suddenly, my thoughts drifted to my late brother. It felt like a dagger piercing my heart. My dear brother, my companion, my best friend, he had passed away in an accident just a few months ago. The memory of him overwhelmed me with sorrow. My sister-in-law's mother informed me that while she herself would attend the wedding, my sister-in-law would not be able to. Why not? Is there any issue? I asked. No, there's no issue at all, she replied. But her own wedding is scheduled for the same day as yours. After seeing her daughter off, I'll come to your wedding, she explained. I nodded in understanding and returned home, but my heart was heavy with sadness. I truly wished my sister-in-law could be there for my wedding. Her presence would have filled the void left by my brother. But what could be done? She couldn't skip her own wedding to attend mine. I kept my feelings to myself. My mother, on the other hand, was planning my wedding with great enthusiasm. This was the last wedding in our family, and she wanted it to be as grand as my brother's. My parents had only 2 children, me and my brother, and my mother had fulfilled all her dreams at my brother's wedding. Now she wanted to do the same for mine. Her excitement was palpable, almost as if she was seeing my brother in me. On the night of the Mendi, I was buzzing with energy. Finally, the wait was almost over. My mother handed me my outfit, and I excitedly went to get ready. I took my time, ensuring every detail was perfect. When I stepped out of the dressing room, I found my mother waiting for me in my room. She was sitting on the bed, surrounded by jewelry boxes, showing me the sets meant for my future wife. Tell me, how do these look for your bride? She asked with a smile. I noticed that more than half of the jewelry belonged to my sister-in-law. Mom, these are my sister-in-law's. You gave these to her at her wedding. They're hers. Why did you take them back? I asked, confused. My mother's expression turned stern. I don't need you to tell me whose they are or where they belong. I've made it clear that she's no longer a part of this family. But you seem unable to let go of her, she said, visibly irritated. I must have been foolish to even show you these. Regardless, I know what belongs to whom, and I will decide who gets what. My decision is final. This jewelry is for your wife, and that's that. She began gathering the jewelry, her frustration evident. I felt a pang of guilt seeing her upset. I couldn't bear to see my mother angry. I immediately went to her side. Mom, my dear Mom, why are you upset? I was just speaking without thinking. I promise I won't say anything to hurt you again. Please forgive me, I said, kissing her hands. Today is your son's wedding day. Can a mother really stay mad at her son on such a special day? Her expression softened, and she smiled. Go away, you cheeky boy. Now hurry downstairs, she said, leaving the room. I looked at myself in the mirror and admired how good I looked, playfully pretending to ward off the evil eye. When I went downstairs, I saw that the entire setup had been arranged in our large lawn. Our house was big enough to host events without the need to book a hall. My brother's wedding had also been held at home, and so was mine. My cousins escorted me to the stage under a canopy, seating me there as the rituals began. But my eyes kept drifting to the entrance, waiting eagerly for my bride to arrive. But my wait was in vain. She didn't come. As the rituals dragged on, my restlessness grew. Finally, my mother approached me and began participating in the rituals herself. Mom, why haven't they come yet? Are we going to take the Mendi to them instead? I asked her. They won't be coming, and we're not going there either, she replied matter-of-factly. Why not, Mom? At my brother's wedding, the Mendi rituals were done together. Why not mine, I questioned, feeling disheartened. She smiled as if lost in the memories of my brother's wedding. That was different, my dear. Your brother and sister-in-law were already married when we celebrated their Mendi. That's why their rituals were combined, she explained. Her words deflated me, and the festive mood vanished from my heart. The excitement I had for the ceremony vanished entirely. Earlier, I wanted the rituals to last long, but now I wished they would end quickly so I could retreat to my room. Without my bride by my side, the event felt dull and lifeless. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ceremony concluded. Relieved, I went to my room and started pacing. My thoughts kept drifting toward my future wife. I desperately wanted to see her, to see how she looked with my name's henna adorning her hands. But alas, society had its ways of keeping us apart. I wondered what she thought of me. Who was she even? I didn't even know her name. A wave of frustration swept over me as I realized how foolish I had been. For months, Mom and I had talked about her, but not once had I asked for her name. I had always referred to her as my future wife, just like Mom did. Now I felt pitiful, both for my situation and my lack of foresight. As I was lost in my thoughts, one of my cousins knocked on the door and entered. "What's up, man? Still awake?" he asked casually. "I thought sleeplessness was only a bride's problem, but you seem equally restless tonight," he teased, plopping onto the bed. He was both my cousin and my close friend, so his casualness didn't bother me. I silently sat beside him. "Everything okay?" "You're unusually quiet," he asked, noticing my demeanor. I shared my feelings and told him the entire story of my cluelessness. He burst out laughing and couldn't stop for a long time. "What a life you have, man. I never imagined you could be this clueless. At the very least, you should have known your future wife's name," he said, laughing again. I frowned, annoyed by his amusement. His laughter only fueled my irritation. "By the way, I do know her name," he said slyly. "Then tell me already," I said eagerly. "Not so fast," he replied, grinning. "You'll have to agree to one small condition first." "I'll agree to anything. Just tell me her name," I said impatiently. "Relax. Hear my condition first," he teased. "Fine. What's your condition?" I asked. When he told me his condition, I smacked him on the back, called him a fool, and laid down to sleep. He spent the entire night teasing me, but I somehow managed to hold my temper. What happened next, however, was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. I was sitting on a rock, lost in thought about my life, when a boy came up to me with a letter. It was from my mother. The letter was filled with her anger and warnings, leaving me no choice but to take leave and return home. Without informing anyone, I arrived home unexpectedly. As I entered, the sound of crying children echoed through the house. Following the noise, I found 2 babies lying in cribs, crying loudly. Despite myself, I walked toward them. But the moment I looked at their faces, I froze in my tracks. My legs felt weak and I stumbled backward in shock. My eyes filled with disbelief as I looked at the babies again and again. The sight remained the same, no matter how much I tried to deny it. My mind raced. Was life playing another cruel joke on me? "No, this can't be happening," I thought desperately. "This is impossible," I shouted at the top of my lungs. Hearing my voice, my mother came out of her room, but my eyes were fixed on a figure stepping out of my room. I stared at her, unable to look away. My mother walked over to me and said, "Son, you're back. I'm so glad you came. I knew you would. All morning, my heart was telling me that you'd arrive today, and here you are." She smiled warmly. "I've made your favorite dishes. Go change your clothes, and then we'll eat together," she said cheerfully. I turned to her, my voice trembling. "Mom, what is all this? Please tell me, Mom, or I'll lose my mind. Who are these children? Whose children are they? And why is my sister-in-law in my room?" I asked, my voice trembling with anguish. Today, I was determined to get all the answers. Hearing my words, my sister-in-law silently walked toward the kitchen. My mother, however, held my hand and guided me to the sofa, motioning for me to sit down. "Sit down, son. I'll tell you everything. That's why I called you here. If only you hadn't run off from the hospital that day, you would have known everything already," she said. "Mom, just tell me quickly." "My head is about to explode," I said, barely containing my frustration. With a deep breath, my mother began explaining everything, leaving no detail untouched as I sat frozen, listening intently. She told me that a few days after my brother's death, she found out that his wife was pregnant and expecting a child. My mother was overjoyed. This would be a part of my brother, his legacy. She took great care of my sister-in-law, ensuring she faced no difficulties during the pregnancy. 6 or 7 months passed this way, but then one day, my sister-in-law's family came with news. They had found a marriage proposal for her and had already accepted it. They planned to have her marry after the baby was born. But my mother refused. She couldn't bear the thought of losing my brother's child or separating the baby from its mother. That's when she came up with a plan, a decision that would change everything. She resolved that my sister-in-law would marry me. Naturally, my sister-in-law wasn't ready for this, but my mother persuaded her with great difficulty. She didn't tell me anything about this because she knew I would never agree. My mother's plan was to reveal the truth after the nikah. That's why she separated the Mehndi ceremonies and sent the wedding procession without me. However, at the last moment, my sister-in-law's health deteriorated and she had to be rushed to the hospital where she delivered premature twins. By God's grace, both babies were healthy. Afterward, my mother forced me to come back and had the nikah performed, but I left before anyone could explain the situation to me. As my mother finished her story, she gently placed the twins in my arms. Both of them looked exactly like my late brother. Tears welled up in my eyes as I kissed their foreheads and held them close. At that moment, my wife entered the room, carrying a glass of water for me. Shame washed over me as I remembered the hurtful words I had said about her in my ignorance. I stood up, looked at her, and apologized sincerely. She lowered her gaze, silent, but I could feel her pain. My mother had been right all along. There wasn't another girl in the world as pure and virtuous as her. If I had rejected her then, I wouldn't have seen the peace and satisfaction on my mother's face today. Nor would I have my brother's children in my arms. The story concludes with Ayan finally accepting the situation and realizing the depth of his mother's love, wisdom, and sacrifices. He also acknowledges the virtues of his wife, whom he now sees as a blessing rather than a burden, and embraces his new role as both a husband and a father to his brother's children.